Time stood still as Eli stared at the crisp stone slabs. 2 names sat, carved into their surfaces, names that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The names of mentors and friends, Natalia Tomiko and Professor Jones. Light refracted off the tear that shattered into a million pieces as it hit the gray stone. Bending down, Eli let a single rose fall from his fingers. It bounced slightly as it hit the ground. Resting his hand on the gravestone, he closed his eyes and breathed deeply.
It all ends today. I promised I would take revenge for my parents, but I promise I will get justice for you. I'm going to end this once and for all. Defoe's days are numbered, and the seconds pass away, drawing him closer to his end.
Eli, we have to get going.
Drawing himself to his full height, Eli brushed his hand against the smooth stone one last time before turning away. Gusts of wind swirled flecks of snow around the empty streets. The snow crunched softly under Eli's boot as he strode down the alleyway. Somber silence drifted through the streets of the capital. Defoe had played his hand. He'd held a public funeral in the plaza of the university for Natalia and Jones. Hundreds of people had packed into the grand space. The square was so jam-packed that Eli, Ashard, Walter, and Scarlett had slipped in undetected.
My fellow countrymen, we are gathered here today in sorrow.
Eli's ears had felt like they wanted to bleed listening to Defoe's voice, as if a needle was shoved in on both sides.
Today we lay 2 great scholars, friends, and mentors to rest. They had given much to us in the way of academics. How much more could they have given us if their lives had not been robbed from them by traitors and terrorists?
An uneasy look passed between them all.
I tell you now, I will not rest until the traitors are found and brought to justice for the deaths of Natalia Tomiko and Professor Jones.
Raging flames of anger devoured Eli's heart as he glared at the slithering demon that stood before the people, lying to their faces. Meandering their way through the streets of the capital, they carefully followed Saga's instructions on where to meet him once they reached the city. Pushing through the windswept streets, they made their way to a large, decrepit warehouse tucked into the far corner of the harbor district. Screeching metal rang through the space as Walter shoved the heavy door open. Light filtered through a gaping hole in the roof, casting its rays all around the dust and snow-covered interior.
Saga really could have picked a better meeting place.
Why do you never like my homes?
The old man's squeaky voice echoed from high above them. Looking up, they found him hunched atop a tower of old dilapidated crates.
This is your house?
No, but I own it.
Beams of rotting wood leaned at awkward angles all around the space. A few rusting bits of metal machinery poked out from mounds of debris. Snow drifted in from a gaping hole, smashed through the roof.
That's not surprising.
Why did you call us here?
Because the entrance to the old city is close by.
Eli jumped back at the closeness of the monk's voice. Swiveling, he found the old man standing at his side.
Come, come. I have built a fire and some food is cooking.
Twisting and climbing, they made their way through the deteriorated building. Warm tendrils of light filled the space, growing brighter and hotter as they pressed further into the building. Ducking out from under a fallen beam, a quaint, clean space greeted them. Flickering flames cast light all around the place, dancing along the walls and hills of junk that filled the warehouse.
Come sit, eat. We have much to discuss.
What did you mean when you said the entrance to the old city?
Over 200 years ago, a long winding staircase was uncovered at this location. A staircase that led down under the harbor. What we found down there was the remains of the old capital, the one destroyed in the Tarzamarian Civil War.
Oh, the Staircase of Time. I read about that several years ago. Most people don't believe it exists.
That is because I hid its location.
Why'd you hide it?
Because the last piece of the relic is down there.
Flower?
Yes, the flower of healing.
How'd you remember all this if you wiped your memory?
Before we left the mountain village, I read through the journal, which unlocked all of my old memories.
Oh, so what are we going to do?
We must find the entrance to the stairs. Its location is written in the journal.
What are we going to do once we get down there?
We are going to reunite the relic and destroy it.
How do we plan on doing that?
We'll first need to return the relic pieces to their natural state. Once they have been returned, we must join them together. Once the pieces are fused together, we will strike and destroy the relic.
Strike with what?
I am not sure. That part of the plan is Robbie's job.
You're letting a goat plan this.
Yes, but only because Robbie is no ordinary goat.
Clopping hooves rang across the decaying space. Rabbi emerged from the shadows, with a long black metal blade gripped between his teeth. Dropping the blade into Saga's hand, he plopped onto his haunches.
I guess that's what we're using to destroy the relic.
The goat shook his fluffy head in response.
Why are we so focused on destroying the relic and ignoring the fact that Defoe is alive and still a threat, and will stay a threat until we kill him?
I don't think we should kill him.
Why not? He's killed so many people. He doesn't deserve to breathe a second longer.
Maybe so, but killing him makes us no better than him.
How can you say that? This man killed my parents and both my mentors, plus countless other people.
He's also done horrendous things for the sake of his twisted goals.
Even though he's your father, you want him dead?
Shrugging her shoulders, Scarlet crossed her arms and leaned back against the wall.
I'm not sure, but I do understand how much of a threat he is. Taking him out is the logical thing.
All eyes fell on the hulking form of Walter.
Well, what about you? Do you think we should kill Defoe?
Flicking away the toothpick he'd been chewing on, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the edge of a rickety table.
Personally, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. Yes, he's done horrible things, and probably the safest way to deal with him is to just kill him. But I also think that spilling more blood isn't going to solve anything.
You've never said no to violence. Why are you saying it now?
Believe me, I'm always in the mood for a good old fight, but I've never intentionally killed someone. I've only done so in self-defense. What you're suggesting is murder. I don't care how you want to justify it, it's murder nonetheless.
How can any of you say this? After everything he's done, after everyone he has taken from us.
You mean after everyone he's taken from you?
Flying across the table, Eli grabbed Walter's collar. He swung his fist at Walter, only to have it smack harmlessly into Walter's palm. Grabbing Eli's fist, Walter dragged him across the table and hoisted him into the air, leaving an inch of space between Eli's feet and the floor.
Enough! The both of you!
Setting Eli to his feet, Walter rolled his shoulders as he marched away, slumping down on a scrappy crate. Astrid rested her hand on Eli's shoulder, squeezing it gently.
Eli, killing him won't bring any of them back. It'll only destroy you.
My personal well-being doesn't matter if he takes the relic and destroys the whole darn country.
Shrugging her off, Eli stormed away, fleeing into the ruins of the warehouse. The thought of Defoe living a second longer ate away at him like acid, burning his mind. A tiny voice of reason fought to the surface of his raging emotions, showing him the truth of what Walter and Astrid were saying. What he wanted went against everything his parents ever taught him. The small light of reason was strangled to death by his seething desire for revenge. Light seeped through a sizable hole cracked into the brick wall of the warehouse. The gap framed the sloping hill that rose up and overlooked the harbor, with the grand hall glinting from its precipice. The lights of the Chancellor's estate shone from the shadows of the hill. He must be there, sitting in his office, laughing at the death and destruction he's caused. The only thing keeping him awake was Eli, holding everything his twisted heart desired. That idea festered in Eli's mind. For once he had all the pieces, not Defoe, and Eli knew how to put him in checkmate.
What are you planning?
Glancing over his shoulder, he spotted the slim form of Scarlet lurking in the shadows.
I don't know.
That's a lie, and you know it.
Coming to his side, she peered out through the gap at the glimmering lights of the estate far across the harbor.
You want to go after him?
Would you stop me if I did?
Silence flooded the air as Scarlet stared out into the harbor.
No.
Would you stop me from killing him?
It's the smart thing to do.
Even though every ounce of Eli wanted to drive a knife into his pitiless heart, the thought of willingly letting your parent be killed sickened him.
He's still your father.
He has always been more of a commander than a father, always issuing commands and directions, rather than being there for us, guiding us. He's lied to me since the day I was born, manipulating me into doing horrible things that'll haunt me forever. I don't care if he dies.
Then we are in agreement?
Yes.
Each gathering up a single revolver and knife, Eli and Scarlet slipped from the decaying building, passing from shadow to shadow, inching their way toward the grand hall. Snow drifted down on the eerie city like ash descending on a burnt wasteland. Creaking hinges and the rustling sounds of alley cats disturbed the silence. Inky blackness crept off from the ocean, filling the sky with its darkness. Buildings changed from the bland brick walls of the harbor district into the white stone of the marketplace. Empty stalls and boarded-up shops sprawled out down every street. Creeping along, Scarlet led them along the curvature of the harbor, never straying too far from the crowded waters. As they moved along the streets, the shadow of the University Hill grew darker. The buildings lining the streets changed from market shops to grand manors. Soaring above the rest was a tall, two-winged manor with a grand path leading to the extravagant doors. Coming to the gate, they peered out at the house. Light filtered out through the thick drapes from several windows all around the house. 2 guards flanked the entrance, and many more walked the grounds.
There's a service gate around the back that is lightly guarded. We can use that to get closer to the house, then enter from the cellar doors.
Swinging around the wall closest to the harbor, they slinked their way towards a large wrought iron gate embedded into the high walls. Swiftly ascending the gate, Scarlet fell to the gravel below like a cat, landing without a sound. Pulling the bolt back, she tugged the gate open a crack, letting Eli pass through. Latching the gate closed, they crept their way to the slanted cellar door. Descending into the cellar, they tiptoed across the frigid room until they reached the far wall. Passing like feathers on a breeze, they found their way into the main house. Ducking from door to door, they snuck through the house. Coming to the opposite wing, they halted, listening to any sound of alarm.
Through here.
Pressing gently against the wall, a soft click sounded through the hall as the wall popped open. Pushing on the door, it swung in, revealing a servant's passage. Squeezing in the cramped space, they ascended a narrow staircase leading up to the 3rd floor. Reaching the end of the stairs, they passed on further into the house. The hallway ran along the rear of the house, ending abruptly somewhere near the middle.
His office is just outside the store. If he's not here, there is a door to his bedroom on the opposite side.
Looking out from a peephole, Eli shifted from side to side, scanning the dark room. A single lamp sat on the massive wood desk, illuminating the room. 3 floor-to-ceiling windows made up the back wall. The room's stillness felt off, as if a single breath could rustle the neatly stacked papers for all the world to hear.
It looks empty.
Watch your footing and try not to touch anything.
Prying the hidden door back, Scarlet slipped into the still room with Eli following close behind. Scanning the room, Eli took in the collection of artifacts, books, and other miscellaneous items that were scattered around the room. Shelves upon shelves of swords, relics, and pieces of art filled 2 walls. A map of the land and surrounding countries decorated the top of the desk. Steam twisted and danced out from a cup sitting on the map. Fresh, hot tea. Their eyes snapped to each other as they noticed the sign of life. The door they had entered from smashed shut, and the room was flooded with harsh, fluorescent light. Eli flung his arm in front of his eyes, trying to block the sudden brightness.
I was wondering when you would arrive.
Steel flashed through the air as Eli drew his knife. A cruel smile cracked across Defoe's wicked face. Excitement and a strange sense of madness radiated from his imposing form.
You'll pay for what you've done. Oh, I know. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. You are in my house, surrounded by my men, in my city, with an entire army loyal to me. I don't care. All I need to do is place this knife in your heart. Oh, Scarlet dear, I had hoped you'd bring him a little less armed. You know how I feel about blood in my house.
Suspicion spread through Eli's mind like a virus. Glancing over, he saw the look of shock and confusion that overtook Scarlet.
But I guess bringing him at all is good enough. Are you still working for him?
What? No, I'm not working for him.
But you are. You always have been and always will be working for me.
No, I'm not working for you. Not after what you did.
Oh, don't tell me you actually cared for those fools.
Diving forward, Scarlet drove her arm against Defoe's throat, slamming him into the wall. The razor edge of her knife bit into the skin of his neck.
I'm never working for you again!
Ha! You don't have a choice in the matter.
I have every choice.
You didn't tell him we were coming?
No, I didn't tell him anything.
Then tell me how he knew we were here. I knew because I told her to come here.
Shut up!
Drawing her fist back, she shot a lightning-fast jab into his face, cracking the wall behind his head.
You didn't tell me anything. I came here to make you pay.
Oh, you are no daughter of mine. Any true offspring of mine would have thought twice before crossing me.
A sickening crack sounded as Defoe whipped his head forward, slamming it into Scarlet's head. In a flurry, his hand grabbed her wrist and twisted her arm back at a wrong angle. The knife clutched in her hand fell clattering to the ground. Striking up with his knee, he drove her into the air. Landing awkwardly, she tried to catch her balance, but was thrown back as he sent blow after blow smashing into her, catching her in the face and chest. Gripping her by the collar and belt, he raised her over his head and flung her motionless body into the far wall, smacking into the bookshelf. A horrid splintering crack filled the air as she thudded to the floor in a mess of books and wood. Eli was frozen in shock by the speed and ferocity at which Defoe delivered each blow. Blood streamed from slits all across her face. A red and purple bulge disfigured the skin just below her left eye, sealing it shut. Defoe dusted off his sleeves with bloodied hands. Slowly, his eyes fell on Eli. An uncontrolled madness shifted in his face. Shuffling back, Eli felt ripples of terror race through his body, shaking his hands uncontrollably. His chest seized up, strangling his lungs. A blood-stained grin flashed across Defoe's horrid face. Lurching forward, Defoe lunged at Eli as he desperately fumbled for his gun. In a flash, an iron grip clutched his hand, flinging it away from his holster. Off balance and pinned against the wall, Eli flinched as Defoe leaned down to stare into his eyes.
You should have never come here.
Air was shoved from Eli's lungs as Defoe's fist dug its way into his chest. Hacking uncontrollably, Eli fell to his knees. Searing pain exploded up the right side of Eli's face as Defoe slammed one last strike into it, sending Eli to the ground. As the world blurred, Eli cried out in pain at the foolishness he felt. They came here to end it, but they only made it so much worse. Resting his head painfully on the ground, Eli's eyes rolled back as the world went black. Pulsing pain thumped in his head in a repetitive rhythm. Sharp-edged iron bit into Eli's wrist, wearing away the skin as it shifted with every painful movement. Shifting tentatively, he rolled his head to one side and found Scarlet's limp form shackled and bleeding. The marbled coloring of bruises covered most of her face. Flaking, crusted blood seeped out from cuts. Her chest rose and fell in almost unnoticeable movements. Guilt flooded his mind, devouring all sense of anger. This was his fault. All of it. Every scar, both physical and emotional, was his fault. The death that had been caused was his fault.
I see you've decided to wake up.
Death-gripping tremors racked his body. Defoe's pompous voice dug into Eli's head. Glancing around, he took in the building and people around him. Light poured in through windows that carved their way through thick, soaring brick walls. Catwalks crawling with men dressed in all black ran along the outer walls. Stacks of crates walled in a small space with 3 entrances, all blocked by armed guards. Sitting in the center of the square was the menacing form of Defoe.
We're in the warehouse district, if you were wondering. Not too far from where your friends are camped out.
Eli's chest seized up at Defoe's words. Millions of horrific thoughts raced through his mind as the fear crept its way through him. Defoe had found Astrid and Walter.
Oh, don't look so panicked. I haven't captured or harmed them yet. I've just asked to talk, and I'd figured this was a good place, if there was any.
Sir, we've seen movement at the other warehouse.
And?
And we've come to bargain.
Astrid stood, backed by the hulking form of Walter, framed in one of the entrances.
I'm so glad to hear that. Please, come in. Have a seat.
Astrid glanced at Eli. Worry radiated from her like the heat of the sun. Hesitantly, Astrid walked deeper into the room. 2 chairs sat opposite Defoe. Stopping just before the chairs, Walter eyed the guards that surrounded them.
If it makes you more comfortable, I'll have my men stand where you can keep an eye on them.
A twisted grin cracked across Defoe's face. Flicking his hand, all his men marched their way behind him. Angling himself so he had the best view of the guards, Walter took a seat. Sitting straight back and tense as a loaded spring, Astrid sat beside her brother.
Is she alive?
Defoe's face twisted in confusion, surprised by Walter's question. Thinking for a moment, Defoe's eyes glanced down at the beaten form of Scarlet.
Oh, her? I think so. I haven't had a chance to check.
Lines of anger contorted Walter's face as it boiled red.
Shall we get started?
What did you do to them?
Only what 2 thieving murderers deserved. Proper punishment.
You're the one who should be bruised and bleeding out on the floor.
Maybe so, but I am not. So don't fantasize about it.
What's this gracious offer you said you had?
Hand over the relics and the journal, and I'll let all 4 of you go free.
What reason would you give that would make us believe you?
If you hand over the relic, the journal, and stay out of my way, you are neither important nor a threat to me.
And if we don't accept?
I caution against that. You've already defied me enough. You're lucky I was gracious to let us end this whole thing peacefully.
How do you know you can trust us?
Slipping a revolver from his belt, Defoe spun around and pulled the trigger. Eli lurched back as a bullet tore through his left arm.
No!
Springing to her feet, Astrid rushed to Eli's side. Walter bolted to his feet, halting as Defoe swung his gun around and aimed it at him.
I don't know if I can trust you, but I can trust the fact that you will do anything to protect your friends.
Searing pain radiated from Eli's arm as flesh burned against the hot metal that lodged itself in his arm. Tears blurred his vision as he glared at Defoe through slitted eyes. Walter eyed the crazy man before slowly sitting back down. Aiming the gun to the sky, Defoe released the hammer and rested it against his leg. Vice-like pain seized Eli's left arm as Astrid tore a strip of cloth from the edge of her shirt, binding the cloth around the wound. Agonizing waves of tightness cut into his upper bicep, inflaming the pain of the metal shard buried in his arm.
So do we have a deal?
Squeezing his shoulder gently, Astrid stood and faced Defoe.
We do.
Good.
Getting to his feet, Defoe waved Martin to his side. Taking a ring of keys from Defoe, Martin bent down and unlocked the chains clasped around Scarlet and Eli's wrist.
Oh, and just before I let you go free, I need one last thing from you.
And what would that be?
Someone who can read the journal. And last I checked, Eli was the only one who could.
That wasn't part of the deal.
I've altered the deal.
You can't do that.
I can do what I like, because honestly, you don't have the means to stop me. So Mr. McCain will be coming with me, or none of you are leaving here alive. Is that understood?
You twisted
It is. I'll go with you. Glad to hear it. Get them up. We have a cave to find.
Slipping her arm under him, Astrid steadied Eli as he got to his feet. Bending down on one knee, Walter scooped up the limp body of Scarlet as armed men surrounded them.
If you could hand over the relics and journal, we can get things started.
We don't have them here.
Then lead the way.
Brushing past Defoe, Walter guided them out of the warehouse and through the grid-patterned roads. Turning left and right, he led them on for what felt like miles. The aching in Eli's body grew, weighing him down and slowing his pace.
Why did you say yes? Why did you give him everything?
I didn't have a choice. He would have killed you otherwise.
For us and everyone who lives, it would have been better to let me die.
It wouldn't be better.
He's too dangerous. If he gets the relics, it'll destroy the world.
If things work out, he won't make it out of this cave.
A tingling sense of confusion wound its way through his mind. What did she mean by that?
This is the place.
Coming around a corner, the decrepit warehouse came into view.
What a sight.
Scrambling over the hill of collapsed wall, Walter led them through the mangled mess of debris. Ducking under a large beam, they entered into the small space where they had met with Saga. Black ash covered and scorched the floor where Saga had built them a fire. Gently laying Scarlet to the ground, Walter marched to a pile of cracked bricks. Shoving them away, he pulled out the sleek shaft of the hammer. Swiping it from his hands, Defoe turned it over, examining every detail.
Just as beautiful as I remembered.
The dim light glinted off the golden shaft of the key as Walter retrieved the remaining 2 relics. Snatching the key from Walter's hand, Defoe flipped it between his fingers. Clenching it in his fist, he closed his eyes. Tendrils of pulsing light spiraled out around his fingers, snaking up his arm, peeking up past his collar, and latching onto his temples. In a snap, the light disappeared, retreating into the key. A small smirk touched the edge of Defoe's lips.
Martin, have your men start digging over there. You should find a circular stone marked with a star.
Right away. Grab some shovels and get digging.
3 of the men disappeared into the decaying warehouse, returning shortly with shovels in hand. Guiding Eli to a stack of old crates, Astrid helped him down as he rested against their rough surface. Sitting beside him, she laced their fingers together. Holding the ring in his hand, Walter bent to one knee. Picking up Scarlet's lifeless hand, he moved to place it on her finger.
What do you think you are doing?
Saving her life.
I don't think so. I need that ring.
You can have it once we get the last relic. Until then, it's useless to you.
Don't think you can play with me.
Any game you play is rigged, so trust me when I say I'd never play against you. You're probably a sore loser.
I find your sarcasm in bad taste.
Whatever.
Slipping the ring onto her slender finger, a pulse radiated through the room. Gasping deeply, Scarlet's chest began to rise and fall in long breaths. Seconds passed by before her eyes fluttered open. A film of drowsiness covered them as she looked here and there, taking in her surroundings.
Walter?
You look horrible.
I feel horrible.
A spark of realization and panic shot through her.
Where is Eli? What happened to Defoe?
Unfortunately for you, I am still here.
Bolting up to a sitting position, Scarlet grabbed a nearby rock and raised it, ready to strike.
I wouldn't do that if I were you. We are currently in a rather shaky working relationship.
How could you?
I don't really care what you're asking about. I want the ring back when we find the last relic.
Swirling around, Defoe dropped the key into his pocket before swiping up the journal and marching over to his son. The rock dropped harmlessly from her hand as he walked away. Taking a deep breath, she leaned back against the rough stone that Walter had propped her up against.
What happened? Where is Eli?
We lost.
Shifting her head, she caught sight of the bandaged and bruised boy.
What do you mean, we lost?
I made a deal with your father to protect you two.
In doing so, she handed over all the relics and the journal.
Why would you do that?
I had no choice.
Yes, you did. Let us go.
It's part of a plan, all right?
What plan?
Sir, we found it.
Good.
Just trust me and follow my lead.
Slowly approaching the hatch, Defoe examined the metal detailing embedded into the stone. Thick lines of weathered metal spiraled together into a small hole at the center of the circular stone. Rising to his feet, Defoe slid the shaft of the hammer into the hole, twisting it clockwise. Pulling the hammer from the slot, dust billowed into the air as the circular panel sunk into the ground before sliding under the floor.
Grab some light.
Unclipping a small lantern from his belt, Martin handed it to Defoe. Its pale yellow light broke through the darkness of the hole that had formed in the floor. The light bounced off the curved walls of the staircase that disappeared as it spiraled down below them.
Stop standing around gawking and get down there.
Springing to action, the guards unclipped their lanterns and fell in rank behind Martin. 4 men took up positions around Eli and the others. Passing from the shadows, 4 robed figures glided to Defoe's side. Thick leather belts held the flowing robes around their waists, and long hoods covered their heads. Handing the hammer, key, and journal to them, Defoe turned back to the stairs.
Let's get moving.
Helping Scarlet to her feet, Walter guided her as she limped towards the stairs. With Astrid at his side, Eli shakily rose to his feet and followed after them. Breaths of cold, damp air wafted out from the shaft. Descending the steps together, they went further and further into the ground. The mundane marching of the spiral pattern went on for what felt like hours. The air grew colder and thick with humidity the further they went. Taking the last step, the damp, moss-covered ground squelched under Eli's foot. A dark tunnel lay gaping open before them. Pressing on, Martin led them further down and out under the harbor. Up ahead, bioluminescent fungi shifted and faded as the flame flickered against the walls of the tunnel. Carved bricks lay embedded into the earthen walls of the tunnel. Soft blue light flickered far ahead of them. As the light grew closer, their pace quickened until they entered into a massive cave. Eerie light filtered in from high above. It shifted and bounced, casting strange shadows around the cavern. The earth and stone walls of the tunnel changed into cracked blocks of faded marble. Stretching out in both directions, the walls of the cave arched around, creating a circular room. Soaring pillars held the dome ceiling that arched above their heads. Punching its way through the center of the ceiling, the strange bluish haze of light filtered in from a hole carved out into the roof. Taking a closer look, Eli spotted old jars and large clay pots cracked and discarded around the edge of the room. Light reflected off of shards of glass embedded in the walls. Vines and vegetation had grown wild, growing all which ways along the pillars.
This isn't a cave.
It's a building.
The old capital, like Saga said.
How fascinating. My father never told me about this place.
Boulders and fragments of once intricately carved stone lay stacked against one another, forming a peculiar hill in the center of the room. Atop the mound was a flower of pure diamond glass. Its petals were tinged with a deep blue that faded as it came to the middle. Glinting at the heart of the flower was a bud of silver and gold that twisted into an egg-like shape. Pushing past his men, Defoe ascended the hill, drawing close to the fragile flower. The diamond glass flower sat planted on a quartz pedestal, cracked and weathered by time. Plucking the fragile stem from the stone, Defoe looked into its shaded petals.
Bring me the journal and Mr. McCain.
Driving the butt of his gun into Eli's back, a guard led him to Defoe's side.
Give him the book.
Shoving the book into Eli's hands, he backed away from the two figures.
What do you want me to do? To be useful for once. I would say gathering the relics for you was pretty useful. Maybe. But that was more of a game than work. And what does work look like to you? People using their skills for the betterment of society. And what are our skills that will help society? Yours is reading this journal, and your friends are motivation to not defy me. Because if you think you can outwit me, or outplay me, you are wrong. I control the board. The game is mine. The pieces are mine. If you defy me, I will kill every last person you love, and you don't have that many people left.
Fumes of anger flared in Eli's chest. He didn't care how much Defoe terrified him. All he wanted to do was drive a knife into his heart.
Is that understood?
Defoe had drawn so close to Eli that they were eye to eye. Eli could feel and smell his dreadful breath brush against his skin. It felt like a disease touched him, spreading and decaying the skin. Those dark, soulless eyes made Eli's stomach churn with an uneasy queasiness.
Yes. Now let's get started, shall we?
Flipping open the journal, Eli found pictures of the relic pieces with text scratched all over one of the pages. On the other was an illustration of the relic reuniting in 4 identical parts. Reading over the words scribbled across the page, he found a single message written across the bottom.
It says, "Great change comes when what is there is broken. Only then can one change into their true form."
Glass filled the air as Defoe slammed the elegant piece of glass against a sharp rock. Pale blue light exploded into the room, blinding everyone. Shielding his eyes, Eli shuffled back as waves of heat as hot as the sun burst forth from the relic. In a blink, the explosion imploded, returning the room to normal. Laying harmlessly on the ground was a triangular-shaped object. Bending down, Defoe picked it up and turned it over in his hand. 2 angled pieces of gold connected to a silver arch that was decorated by glowing white runes and a blue gem depicting the flower.
How interesting. This might be simpler than I thought. Bring me the relics.
Approaching Scarlet, one of the robed men reached for the ring. Walter cut him off. Overturning his hand, the figure offered it as if asking for the ring. Gripping the ring, Scarlet pulled it from her finger. A pulse shot through the room, sending a tingling ripple down her spine. Her legs gave out from under her, collapsing her into Walter's arms. Steadying her, he helped her sit against one of the pillars. Taking the ring from Scarlet, the robed man marched up the mound, followed by his 3 compatriots. Slowly approaching Defoe with the 3 remaining relics, they presented them in their outstretched hands. The 4th robed man knelt at Defoe's feet. Once Defoe placed the triangular-shaped piece down on the man's hand, he rose and stepped back. Picking up the key, Defoe laid it on the pedestal where the flower once was. Gripping the slender shaft of the hammer, he shifted it in his hands before raising it high, bringing it flying onto the key. Pure white light enveloped the room once more, radiating a cold, harsh wind through the space. In a blink, it was gone, and another triangular-shaped piece lay in place of the key. The ruins had changed, and an etching of the key was placed on the silver arch. Removing the new piece, Defoe handed it off to one of the robed priests. Grabbing the ring, he placed it atop the charred pedestal. Raising the hammer once more above his head, he brought it thundering down, smashing it into the ring. A chilling gust of air swirled through the room as it was overtaken by a harsh red light. As Eli was wrapped in the chilling light, he felt time go still. The flowing of blood in his veins stopped. Every muscle went stiff, holding him in place. 2 eyes peered out from the explosion of the ring. 2 eyes like that of an eagle, gazing into his soul. Shooting out from the ball of red light, a ghostly bird rushed towards him. Diving into his chest, it vanished in a puff of smoke, throwing him away as time snapped back. Splitting pain erupted in his shoulder as it crashed against the hard ground. Tumbling down the mound, rocks drove into his side, knocking the air from his lungs. The world spun around him as he slid to a halt. Aching pain nauseated him as he lay gasping on the ground. Astrid came to his side in a blur. Placing a gentle hand on his labored chest, his mind slowed. Soothing pulses of energy rushed through him, numbing the pain. Driving his elbows into the ground, he pushed himself up. Gazing past Astrid, he watched as Defoe handed off the 3rd piece of relic. Wielding the hammer, he flung it high above his head and drew it down, smashing the shaft against the pedestal. Swirling tendrils of green, orange, and purple light shot off in all directions, spinning and twisting all around, till they exploded against anything they touched. Picking up the last piece, Defoe held it gently, like a father holding his child. Coming to his side, the priests knelt before him, raising the relics high above their bowed heads. Auras of energy illuminated around the pieces as they began to float up from the priest's hands. Tentatively rising into the air, the relics drew close to one another. One by one, they snapped together like magnets, pulled together by an invisible force. Each snap sent a burst of energy through the air, shoving everyone back. As the last piece latched into place, it glowed with a holy hot fire, illuminating the whole space. Floating high above them all was a spectacular amulet. A golden star of the purest quality formed the center of the amulet. Silver arches ran from point to point of the star, forming a glowing halo around the gold. Runes and small etchings of the relic pieces decorated the arches. Every detail was crafted with such skill and perfection that it could never have been made by human hands. Descending slowly, it rested gently in the greedy hands of Defoe. A joyful madness crinkled his face.
After centuries of searching, I have it. My birthright. Hundreds have stood in my way, hundreds have failed.
Staring at the relic, a peculiar expression crossed his face.
I understand now. There is no oncoming storm that would destroy the nation. There is only me, the storm that will judge the world. I am the oncoming storm. That will be its destroyer and its redeemer. I will be like a god, terrible and magnificent.
A bolt of red fire burst into the room, flashing across the space, throwing Defoe from his feet. Blurs of black cloth and white stone rained down around the mound as it was struck by the red bolt. As the dust settled, the white horns of Rabbi glinted in the blue light.
What in the blessed realm?
A blazing fire filled the goat's eyes. His muscles rippled as he took a stance against Martin and his men.
Shoot that goat!
One of Martin's men flew into the air as his back was ripped apart by a shotgun slug. Spinning around, all eyes landed on the small, ragged form of Saga with a shotgun gripped in his frail hands.
Well, hello there, my friend.
Crawling from the dust and debris, Defoe glared at the raggedy monk.
Saga?
Hello, Alexander.
You're alive?
Unfortunately, yes.
How did you survive?
Same way you did. The ring.
Oh, of course you did. You were always copying me.
I would disagree. I am not a raging lunatic.
Neither am I. Kill them all!
Cocking their guns, Defoe's men turned on them. Springing into action, Walter gripped the rifles of the two nearest men. Using the guns as a lever, he flung the helpless men into the air. Pumping off 2 rounds, Saga sent 2 more to their graves, leaving only Martin and 4 others. Bolting across the space, Rabi slammed into Martin, throwing him to the wall. Ducking out of the way of the goon's aim, Walter dove to the ground, unloading the 2 rifles he'd taken, scattering the men. Grabbing Astrid by the arm, Eli rolled them behind a pillar as bullets ricocheted off the stone around them. Walter fell back in pain as a bullet tore through his leg. Sliding behind a large rock, Scarlet snatched up one of the fallen rifles. Breathing deeply, she popped out from cover and shot off a single round, catching a guard in the chest. Spinning through the air, Rabi rammed his horns into the skull of one and shot a hoof into the chest of another. Saga sprinted across the ground with blinding speed. Swinging the empty shotgun in all directions, he sent the last 2 men crashing to the ground. As the ringing sound of a gunfire fell silent, a tense stillness filled the space.
You will all pay for your insolence!
Defoe stood atop the mound, the relic clutched in his hand. Tendrils of light illuminated out of it, dousing the room in a harsh light. Agonizing cries of pain tore their way out of the throats of his friends.
Astrid? What is it?
Astrid clutched at her chest, curling up in pain. Her eyes filled with horror as she wiggled helplessly in Eli's arms. Looking around, Eli saw as Saga fell to his knees. Walter lay digging his fingers into the ground as his veins bulged in his head. His face was growing beet red. Locking eyes, Eli saw the light leaving Scarlet's eyes. She lay shifting weakly in pain on the ground. Gazing at Defoe, he saw madness and anger in his eyes. Eyes that had gone deathly black.
Defoe, stop! I will not stop until you all submit to me!
Realization clicked in Eli's mind. Defoe was using the relic's ability to overwhelm everyone but him.
Eli.
Whipping his head around, Eli came face to face with Rabi. The black blade Rabi had shown them before lay at his hooves.
Why isn't the relic affecting me?
Because you have been blessed. Now take the blade and destroy the relic.
Gently laying Astrid down, Eli grabbed up the blade and turned his sights on Defoe. Dashing out from cover, he raced towards the towering man. Moving across the ground with blinding speed, he closed the gap in seconds. Striking out with the blade, Eli felt it collide with the relic. Light exploded through the room as the blade sliced through the relic. As the world came into focus, Eli locked eyes with a terrified Defoe. Black lines of decay spread out from the slash that dug straight through the relic, devouring the decorated metal, speeding up Defoe's arm. Shock turned to rage as Defoe's arm broke apart in a cloud of ash. A blackened and decaying relic fell harmlessly to the floor.
What have you done? What needed to be done?
Striking out with his shoulder, Eli drove Defoe to the ground. Landing in a puff of dust, Defoe scrambled to get up again, but Eli slammed his foot into his chest, knocking him down. Placing his foot on Defoe's chest, he pressed him into the dirt. Glaring at the man who'd done so much, Eli knew this was his chance to take revenge for all the people Defoe had killed. Hesitate, and it would vanish. Defoe did not control the board anymore. He did not control the game. He'd lost all the pieces. The game was over and Eli had won. Drawing the blade above his head, Eli stared into the soulless eyes of his tormentor, the thing of his nightmares. Looking into those eyes, he saw something he had never seen in them before: fear.
This ends here.
Light bounced off the black blade as it flashed through the air, plummeting down towards Defoe's chest. Wood splinters exploded into the air as Astrid swung a stick, blocking Eli's blade.
What are you doing?
Eli, don't do it.
Astrid stepped in between Eli and Defoe, making Eli look at her, a longing for him to stop, to do anything but plunge the sword into Defoe's deformed heart radiated from Astrid.
Don't lose yourself in this hatred, this want for revenge. I need you whole.
Light bounced all through the room as the sword wobbled uncontrollably in Eli's trembling hands. His vicious grip eased, letting the blade slip from his grasp, clattering harmlessly onto the moss-covered stone. A weak smirk crept onto Astrid's relieved face. Pulling him close, she wrapped him in her arms. Tears stained her shoulder as grief racked his aching body.
Fools!
Searing pain shot through Eli's side as cold metal bit into his flesh. Gasping for air, Eli stared, horrified, into the cold, emotionless pits of Defoe's eyes. The black metal blade was clutched in Defoe's hand. Its metal edge pierced through Astrid's chest and dug into Eli's side.
You should have killed me quicker, boy!
Yanking the biting metal from their sides, Defoe slammed his fist into Astrid's shoulder, sending them both crashing to the ground. Wincing in pain, he rolled her over. Dark tendrils of red seeped across the fabric of her shirt, just below her heart. Panic filled her eyes as she gasped desperately for air.
You'll pay for what you've done!
Defoe towered over them, the blood-stained blade gripped tightly in his hand.
All of you will pay! And you will pay with your lives!
Not if you pay first.
Confusion twisted across his face. Blood seeped from a hole in his chest. Looking up, he stared at his daughter. Scarlet glared back at him, a smoking gun clutched in her bruised hand.
How could...
Blood splattered the ground as a bullet lodged itself in his forehead. The light of life left his eyes as his body crumpled to the floor. Eli's breaths came in ragged gasps. Each inhale sent needle-like splinters of paint shooting through his side. Gently, Astrid brushed away the tears rolling down Eli's cheek. Looking into each other's eyes, they knew it was over. All the pain would disappear. They were going now, and nothing could stop it. Pulling him close, their lips locked together in one last tender kiss as the world slipped away.
You have done well, my friend.
Eli's eyes snapped open. The endless light of the void surrounded him. Astrid lay wrapped in his arms. Shifting in his hold, her eyes opened and she looked up at him. Standing to their feet, they gazed around at the emptiness.
Where are we?
You are in the void, the place between the physical world and the spiritual one.
Searching for the voice, Eli found its owner sitting upon a rock in the endless white. Though it had Rabbi's voice, it did not look like the goat. It was a tall man with arms the size of tree trunks and legs as hard as stone with sandals strapped about their base. Two arching horns stuck out from the long ringlets of brown hair that cascaded down to his back. Thick, bushy brows shadowed eyes the color of rubies. Prominent cheekbones drew the eyes in towards the strong nose and thick goatee. A thick brown wool tunic draped itself over a well-toned and muscular chest. The tunic was strapped at the waist by a glittering golden belt. Hanging around his neck by a leather cord was a pendant of 4 golden wings shooting out from a star. A soft smile greeted Eli as he stared at the godlike being.
Robbie, is that you?
Yes, it is me, in my true form.
You look different.
Yes, the goat is my preferred method of disguise.
Rabbi, we died, didn't we?
Somewhat. You are between life and death.
Why are we here?
Because you have a choice to make.
What choice?
The choice of a second chance at life.
A second chance? Why do we get a second chance? We died. That's supposed to be it.
Eli, you've been so consumed with regret and rage that you did not spend your time well. You always acted in your own self-interest, rarely taking into account the needs of those around you. But at the end, you stopped and listened. You listened to her. She wanted you whole and without the blood of murder in your hands.
That doesn't change the fact that we shouldn't get a second chance at life. Jones didn't. Natalia didn't.
Did they?
I wish I could have given them one, but that is outside of my power. Your chance is being given by the one that is, the one that was, the one who always will be.
Why are we being given this chance?
Because you both have much to do. The Blessed One has plans for you, and they are far from over. So I urge you to take this and to go forth with purpose and meaning, knowing that you have died to yourself and can live again.
What is it we have to do?
That is for me to know and for you to discover.
How will we know if it's the right thing?
We are never quite sure what the right thing is until we do it. That is the exciting part of life. Now again, I urge you to take the second chance and return to the land of the living.
What will happen if we don't?
The world will keep turning, but with a little less light in it. Each life is important in the world. It's what makes the world interesting. We need the world, but the world does not need us.
What are you saying?
You can go back and help shape the world into a better place, a kinder place for those who will come after you. Or you can go on to the spiritual realm and let the world be as it is.
Why end the adventure here? It sounds like we have a lot more to do.
Life is a mystery worth discovering, I guess.
Shall we return?
Looking at Astrid, Eli waited for her answer.
Yes.
Very well. Let's get back before Walter does something destructive.
Placing his muscled hands on their shoulders, Rabbi wrapped them in an orb of light. His eyes began to glow a bright white. Wind whirled around them, blowing away the whiteness of the void. In a blink, Eli felt the world again, the warmth and the cold, the feeling of air passing through his lungs. Opening his eyes, he stared up at the hulking form of Walter, who was stooped over his sister.
Walter?
Astrid!
Scooping them up in his arms, Walter squeezed them tightly in a bear hug.
I thought you guys died.
We kinda did, but we're all right.
Peering over Walter's shoulder, Eli caught sight of Scarlet standing over the lifeless body of her father. Breaking away from Walter's death-gripping hug, Eli crossed to her side. Sensing his presence, she pulled herself away from staring at the lifeless body and looked at him. Resting his hand on her arm, he drew her into a hug. Her body went tense as he wrapped his arms around her. Hesitating for a second, she leaned in and wrapped her arms around him. The 5 counselors sat in the shadows of the high windows that took up the back wall of the courtroom. Blocks of stone and scaffolding, evidence of the terrorist attack by the Black Sands several months ago, blocked off the remainder of the room.
You expect us to believe that our Chancellor, a man who has led our nation courageously for years, was a lunatic and a madman?
I stand before the court with nothing but my testimony and the scars to prove it. So do all of my friends. We have found any and all witnesses that could help verify what we have said. Scarlett Defoe has a written confession from Wilfred Defoe, and we have countless documents from both Natalia Tomiko and Professor Joan. I also have the remains of the relic, which will match any records you have of it.
Thoughtful silence descended on the hall as the counselors flipped through the pages of Eli's evidence.
It seems like you have a lot more than your testimony and scars to back up your claims. The witnesses and evidence you have brought forth is astounding, to say the least. And would you say that you and your compatriots have never acted with ill intent against the security of the nation?
We never wanted to risk the security of our homeland. We only wanted to protect it and take justice for its people.
But not all of you are native to this nation. The Finleys are immigrants, are they not?
Oh, do shut up, Liam.
Seeing as you and your friends only ever acted with good intent and have solved the murders of 4 of our dear friends, as acting Chancellor, I pass the judgment on you, Mr. McCain. I find you and your friends innocent of any crime against the blessed land.
Thank you.
However, concerning Miss Defoe, we need more time to understand her involvement in her father's terrorist activities.
I hope you look favorably on her. She is not her father.
Stepping down from the podium, Eli marched his way through the large open doors. Passing Scarlet, he wrapped her in an encouraging embrace before she took her place before the council. The large doors banged shut as Eli made his way towards the Great Hall. Climbing the steps, Eli marched into the high dome room of the Great Hall. Astrid, Walter, and Rabbi sat looking out into the bustling harbor with its flock of massed ships setting sail for the first voyages of the spring.
What did they say?
Hopefully something intelligent for once.
They didn't find us guilty, but they have yet to decide Scarlett's fate.
If they try and throw her under the train for what that scumbag did, I'm going to cause a whole lot more trouble than he ever did.
That's a high mark to reach.
It is, and it won't be a problem.
At one point I would agree with you, but you're not nearly as violent as you used to be. Now you're a big teddy bear.
Shut up.
The seconds turned into minutes, which dragged on till they became hours.
If this takes any longer, I'm going to barge in there and make them decide.
They've already decided.
Bolting to his feet, Walter spun around, spotting Scarlet as she crossed over to them.
What did they decide?
I assume it's good considering you're standing here?
It's the best I could have hoped for.
Which is?
I have my freedom.
Yes!
Cool.
In exchange for that freedom, I have to disassemble what remains of my father's organization and bring my brothers to justice.
Your brothers?
Martin escaped custody, and Diego has disappeared.
Well, hey, that freedom is better than no freedom.
Yes, it is.
So when do you leave?
I have a lead, and I'll be heading out in 3 days.
Not alone, you're not. I'm coming with you.
What?
Chasing down those scoundrels sounds like a heck of a lot more fun than staying here and watching those two sappy puppies all the time.
We're not sappy all of the time.
Heck yeah, you are.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Anytime.
I agree with this plan. Walter staying here, twiddling his thumbs, will only lead to the world's destruction.
Walter's jaw dropped to the ground as he stared at the goat.
Did that goat just talk?
20 years later.
Life is a mystery worth discovering. We never know where it might take us, nor can we expect it to turn out one specific way. But that is the fun of it all. No matter the decisions we make or the problems we create, we can always do our best to fix them and learn from them. Every second is a chance to change, to grow. I made many mistakes during the events of the Relic Expedition, and I have had to live with them, but they do not define who I am. So I want all of you to take that as a lesson as you continue your studies here.
Professor McCain,
Yes?
what happened to the others?
Well, Walter and Scarlet spent a number of years dismantling the Black Sands and tracking down the Defoe brothers. After that, they settled down together up north. As for Astrid and myself, we finished up our studies and eventually got married. Unfortunately, Saga passed away shortly after the events of the cave.
What about Rabbi? Where is he?
Not sure. He shows up from time to time, but he has very important work that keeps him away. Oh well, that is all we have time for today. Don't forget that you have report papers due on Wednesday and a test coming up next week. Have a good day, everyone.
Collecting up his things, Eli made his way through the octagonal lobby of the Explorers Guild. Crossing the green lawn of the plaza, he passed under the arch entrance of the university and headed down the winding streets of the capital city. Coming around a bend, he spotted the red door of his home. The home he had built with Astrid, a place not built on revenge and anger, but on hope and peace. Defoe had left his scars on Eli, but they never consumed him. His revenge never consumed him. Pushing open the door, Eli was greeted by the rushing sound of several pairs of small feet. Wrapping his arms around his children, he held them close, knowing they were born into a world of forgiveness rather than one of a son's revenge.